It's thinking about it. Hey everyone, I'm Nicole Guillaume with Guiding Echoes, and today I have a special guest for you. His name is Matthew Stapley. He is a psychic medium, and today he will be joining me so we can talk about self acceptance on the spiritual journey. So, welcome, Matthew.
Thank you very much for having me, Nicole. I am really, really excited to be here, truly.
I'm excited too. So, like, the first time I found Matthew was actually on the Edge of the Rabbit Hole. So, that's like a shameless plug for my boyfriend's channel. But it's true, you were on his show. And I just immediately loved what you had to say. I loved your energy. I loved your enthusiasm. And just right away, I knew you were good people. So, ever since then, we've been kind of talking on Facebook pretty much every day.
It's even about comforting cucumbers, or not
Yes.
cucumbers, zucchinis.
Zucchinis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Well, zucchinis need love too. I mean, come
And
on.
what doesn't need, especially these days with the way that our world is, I think, yeah, like vegetables, people,
Right.
animals, like we all need it for
We
sure.
all need some love. I feel you. So tell people a little more about yourself.
Well, I like long walks on the beach and wine by the. Just kidding. I'm a psychic medium. I'm located in Ottawa, Canada. I love glitter and helping people and craft projects and birds and animals. I mean, I think overall, I basically just like everybody else, trying to get through life and trying to do my best to help other people along the way, and that's basically it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the things that we decided to talk about today was self acceptance on the spiritual journey. So let's start with this. Like, what exactly does self acceptance mean to you? Because I think it can have a different feel to different people, but what does that mean to you?
I think you're very right. Like we all have our own interpretation. For me, I think self-acceptance is about taking all of the things that we like about ourselves and all of the things that we may not yet like about ourselves and bringing them into one arena where we can create balance and harmony, and also to take the things that we dislike, right? And see the benefit of it, because a lot of things we don't like about who we are great qualities in their sort of ugly duckling phase, in a sense. And so to me, self acceptance is about taking all of the pieces of ourselves and bringing them into a useful space, a space where they're actually beneficial qualities.
So, a lot of times you'll hear about self acceptance and self love and shadow work, when you're on this spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Turn on any podcast, read any book, and it seems like those are different terms that come in. So, recently someone was asking me about shadow work, and I'm just wondering, how do you feel self acceptance and shadow work can go hand in hand?
I think they go. I don't think you can really have one without the other. Actually, like if we look at what shadow work is like crawling into the closet with our skeletons and having tea with them and figuring out when they came to be within our lives. And self acceptance is like taking those skeletons and dressing them up into something beautiful, in a sense, right? A
Right.
little bit at least. And so, I think both of those things go together. I think they go hand in hand. I think they're both vital to our process as people if we want to be healthy people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that too. Because when people come up to me and they start asking about shadow work, and I think shadow work has become this overused buzzword, and people think that it means that you have to get back into the depths of your deepest, darkest moment and really like clean the closet. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's so much about just embracing, like you were saying, embracing all parts of yourself.
Yeah.
And even having compassion, I think, towards that shadow side of you. And for those of you who don't know, the shadow side is that part of us that maybe we don't like all that much, or that part of us that encourages us, I guess you could say, to do usually the wrong thing. So it could be lying to a friend, lying to ourselves, that sort of a thing. But when we really stop and think about it, people don't typically do the wrong thing because they're evil. They do the wrong thing because they feel trapped, or, there's just something else going on. So when you can feel compassion for the situation that you were in when you did that wrong thing, I think that's a form of self acceptance and self love. So yeah, that's That's my point of view on that.
I think you've nailed it though, really. Like, I mean, all of the like when we act in a negative, I hate the word negative and positive, but if we act
Right.
in the societal definition of negative, when we act within that space, we're just acting from a place of pain. And
Right.
our shadow self is all the things that we dislike and all the things that we ignore. I think it's sort of our unconscious self, in a sense, the part that is below the foundation of who we are. And when we can bring those things up, which they come up on their own, I think that's what people often don't realize is, like, for example, the idea of being triggered, like, our triggers are valuable little things. I mean, they could be viewed as a canary in a coal mine. They could also be viewed as like the treasure map of, like, what created this experience, what produces this reaction when X, Y, and Z happen. And we can use that to go within ourselves and really pull apart our past and figure out how we came to be the way that we are. And I think it's a beautiful, painful process filled with love and nervous breakdowns and, all of these amazing human things. As hard as it is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So why is self-acceptance so important on the spiritual journey?
I think that it's important. Well, I think it's important, period. But I think if you look at the state of our world right now, it is needed like it has never been needed before. Because when we can accept ourselves and we can see the pain behind our, like, negative actions and things like that, then we all automatically become more accepting of other people because we can see the pain behind their actions. And so it actually creates a better sense of harmony. I think our world is very polar, and I think that's in some ways necessary. But I really feel that judgment doesn't have to be there. We can still have darkness and light and positive and negative and all of these things without all the fear, without the judgment, where we can just accept things as they are rather than having to assign a pathological explanation to them.
Right.
So I think it's vital, not just to us spiritually, but to the world itself, if we want to get to a place where everybody feels as embraced as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I've learned in self-acceptance, like you were saying, when you're able to accept yourself more and have compassion to yourself, that has a ripple effect. You are able to look at other people with more compassion and with more empathy and maybe understand why they behave in the ways that they do. Yeah. And the other thing that I've also noticed about self-acceptance on the spiritual path is when you issue self-acceptance, it's not just love that comes out of that, it's trust. You start to trust yourself more. Yeah. You don't doubt your experience so often. And that's one of the things that I find is such a healing aspect, especially towards people who maybe have been in abusive relationships or grew up in really toxic environments, is once they learn self-acceptance, that also means trusting their own experience. They have more trust in themselves, more confidence. Yeah. They learn what it means to be compassionate to themselves. And, I don't know if you're familiar with reparenting, but they learn how to do that as well. Yeah. And I find that when especially highly intuitive people such as yourself are able
and me,
thank you, the both of us, and so many of our viewers are highly intuitive. They when they're able to embrace themselves in self-acceptance, it really seems to be that moment that their psychic gifts are able to shine more.
Oh, hugely, because they've removed all of the what ifs and the fears and basically the crap that gets stuck to the lens. I think they're like polishing that off, because when we do go into ourselves and we can see things objectively. I noticed somebody in the comments mentioned mirroring. Well, if you look, the whole world, the universe itself is a mirror for our soul experience. I call it the cosmic mirror because that's the only word I could describe it as. But, when we step in front of that cosmic mirror, we will see all of the good and the things we don't like and all of that. And through that process of self-compassion, as you said, we are really just polishing that mirror. We're not changing necessarily what we see in it, but our relationship to what we see in it changes. And it does enhance our intuition and our ability to be confident that we will get through whatever it is that we're going through. I mean, we're only going to have one thing in our whole lives that are going to kill us, one thing. And it's probably not today.
True.
Hopefully,
Probably not.
hopefully.
Sheila put a really interesting comment down here. She says, it's very hard to forgive yourself. I want to, but I don't understand how to tell yourself you love and forgive every day because it's only words. I'm trying to better myself a whole lot. So that's a really interesting concept that she's bringing up is they feel like they're just words.
Yeah.
So how do you forgive yourself and love yourself when it feels like just empty words to you?
It is a process, Sheila, and I can completely relate to it because I've been there and sometimes still go there because healing is it's a constant journey. It's never we can become healed of certain things, but are we healed fully ever in our lifetime? Probably not, because there's new things to work on because we live in 2021. But I would say be patient with the process. Define what forgiveness means to you. What does it look like for you to have forgiven yourself, and approach it from that angle? Because I think from what I'm reading in your question, and also just kind of what I feel intuitively, it sounds to me like the word has, in a sense, lost a bit of meaning. So what I would recommend for you would be to figure out, write down the definition of forgiveness of the self for you. I would then figure out what that would look like. How would you be if you've forgiven yourself? Because I've got a feeling you might be closer to this than what you actually realize. A lot of the time when people say forgiveness, they think of either church or they think of being able to fully let something go in a way where it really doesn't bother them anymore. And forgiveness isn't necessarily either one of those things. The common definition of it is being able to love continuously through something that has happened, through an experience, and still see compassion and all of that for that person, whether it's yourself or somebody else, and being able to accept that it had happened, and also accept boundaries for the future. You don't have to have it happen again. Just because we forgive something doesn't mean it has to continue or we have to continue to endure it. But for you specifically, I would recommend really defining what it looks like and what it means for you and what your optimal self-forgiven self would look like, and decide what that is, and then break down how to get there. And that would be my recommendation.
Awesome. I love that explanation. Good job, Matthew.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. I try.
All right. And Joe actually had a really good question. She says, something has happened. Is there a way to know that it's real and that I haven't filled in the story with an ego story filler? That's a really brilliant question.
I like it. So what you're asking is, are your thoughts becoming chameleons for the experience? And I love that stuff. I think I would look at it a few different ways. So the first thing you could do is do a bit of an assessment on it. Okay, what's the worst that would happen if I made all of it up, if my ego filled in the gaps? But then also look at what might be lacking within yourself, or what was lacking within the experience itself that your ego feels the need to fill in the blank spaces. Because here's the thing, even if that happened a little bit or there was an exaggeration or whatever, there's still an underlying thing there of needing something in the experience that may not have been there, whether it be love, acceptance, understanding, trust, belief, any of those things. And so, yeah, I would be looking in that direction if it were me. And I would take off the idea that you made it up, because at the end of the day, even if you made it up, that you're still needing something within that situation that wasn't there. If you haven't made it up, then you're still needing something within that situation that wasn't there. So it's really more of a question of what may be missing for your self-healing journey, or what was missing at the time that this happened that you can now give back to yourself to sort of level that off. So I would take the burden of that fear away, and I would say, well, you know what, whether my ego filled in the blanks and I imagined things that weren't there, or whether they happened and now I'm second guessing myself, there's still an element of something being needed by you. And it's just a matter of figuring out what the heck that might be.
Right, absolutely. Well, and then it was interesting because earlier we were talking about mirrors, and the mirror work. And in a way, the story that you're telling yourself about a situation, that is a mirror too. So whatever your thoughts are reflecting to you, that's a mirror of, like Matthew was saying, what you're needing, what you're lacking. And really the story you're telling yourself about your own experience.
Yes.
And I think that your self-worth is often hidden in those stories. So if you're telling yourself, oh my gosh, I think I made this up, what you're really saying is deep down inside, you think you're a liar, or you've got imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
There's something going there. So it's a really good mirror to sit down and investigate it, and then also ask, the whole, is it true? The question, like, is it true that I'm a liar? Is it true that I often make stuff up? Is it
Most
true
people
that
aren't.
Yeah, they're not. They're not.
No.
Some people, if anything, we all tend to see things differently, but that's not the same as, of course, just making something up, as we have different perceptions. So you sit down and you really analyze what you're telling yourself about your story, because a lot can be said about our experiences and how we interpret that. So I just thought that was a brilliant question.
Yeah, I think so too. I loved it. And no one's ever asked me that, I don't think. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that one before.
Yeah, that was right. I've got a smart audience, I'm telling you.
No kidding. I'm loving it. It's awesome.
Yeah, smart, intuitive people here. All right. So Lynn always has amazing questions too, and she just asked, does holding grudges affect your psychic abilities?
So, do you want me to answer it, or do you want to do that one?
Well, we can both answer this one. So
okay. Should we rock, paper, scissors to figure out who's going to start?
Okay, ready?
1, 2, 3. Try again.
Psychic or something.
1, 2, 3. Okay, we're 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're just. You know what? You go first.
All right. So, does holding a grudge affect your psychic ability? I think that depends on what your definition of a grudge is. So I have a really different view when it comes to forgiveness, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. So the reason that I don't like the word forgiveness is because I also feel that's become this really blanket term. And a lot of times when people hear the word forgiveness, they think of reconciliation. And you don't have to reconcile with someone in order to forgive them. And then also, forgiving someone doesn't necessarily mean they're off the hook for whatever their crime is. It means that you're basically just like, all right, sayonara, I'm out. And so when that happens, that's really you creating a boundary for yourself. And so when that happens, I think that sometimes we can look at that as a grudge, when really what it is, it's a boundary. And so a grudge is when, in my definition of a grudge, would be when you are absolutely soaked in the energy of this horrible thing that happened, this betrayal, and you absolutely will not let it go. So you're thinking about it every day. You're thinking about what you should have said and what you should have done. And, this person in this situation has really just taken up space in your mind, and you've decided to set up shop and happily live there. And maybe in doing so, you've decided that you're going to contemplate different ways that you can make this person pay. So a grudge, you have to be careful with grudges, because there's a fine line between a boundary and that grudge. And the grudge, you're usually seeking some type of redemption or justice, and you want to see some type of revenge. And so you call upon yourself to be the person who deals out justice. And in some situations, maybe that's okay. Like if it's truly something horrible and you have to go through the court case and all that, that's a little different. But when you allow yourself to just simmer in that energy, of course, that's going to affect your psychic abilities, because if you're sitting and steeping in that energy of hatred, and your hatred has basically become like, the tea bag that's flavoring your energy, your water, there isn't any other energy that can come in. And so if you're steeped in that hatred and that anger, other energies, whether it, that's your psychic abilities or spirits on the other side, they're going to walk on over to you and be like, oh yeah, no thanks. Like, I couldn't even get my message through that energy, through that anger if I wanted to. And, there's also the risk they would take, and by they, I mean spirits on the other side, of their message being greatly distorted because you're so into this anger. So that said, I do believe if that's your definition of a grudge, that's my definition of a grudge, then yeah, I think that can absolutely, I wouldn't say affect your psychic abilities. I would say deflect your psychic abilities. So Matthew, what do you think about that?
I agree with you completely. The only thing that I would add to it, and really it's very minor, would be that like, and I'll explain it through an example. So one time I went to get a reading from somebody who was getting a divorce, and I was getting divorced, and every other client they had was getting divorced. And so
Oh, wow.
the concern that I have is projection of information. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I wasn't even married, so I knew I wasn't getting a divorce. So, like, so I think in that sense, their own anger with what was happening in their life ended up in all of the readings they were doing, and really put a different lens on their intuition and their ability to interpret energy as information. And so, yeah, that would be the only thing I would add to that. But other than that, I mean, you nailed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, nailed it. It was good. Great answer.
So, all right. So Jackie's saying, I recently forgave a person. He took it as we were okay and all, but no, he crossed my boundaries and I won't let it happen again. So I terminated our relationship. Jackie, good job, girl. Good job. And that's what you have to do sometimes. So, and going back to the self-acceptance thing, a lot of times self-acceptance means saying no to the people that are hurting you and to the people that are crossing those boundaries, because self-acceptance a lot of times means that you have to say yes to yourself. Yeah. So
I think it was a really good thing. And, just because we forgive somebody doesn't mean we're allowing the behavior to continue. Like, those are two different things. You can love somebody dearly and never, ever want to see them again. Like, both of those aren't mutually exclusive things. So sometimes when somebody's on this sort of like war path that hurts them and us, then we have to just love them from a distance sometimes, I think.
Yeah. Well, and then sometimes I'll give you guys an example of something that happened really recently. So I have quite a few family members that are related by blood who I cut off many, many years ago for reasons I won't get into. But if you watched my YouTube channel before, you probably know what those reasons are. But anyways, moving on. So I've made it clear to certain family members that I don't want contact with them. So, sadly, I had to go no contact with some family members. And I have a couple who still try to sneak in every 2 years or so. And so one of them recently tried to connect with me on Facebook, tried to join my Facebook group. Finally, yesterday sent me an email. And by then I was like, I have to respond to this, because if I don't, she's going to continue cyber stalking me. And so I wrote a very assertive email. And I mean, when she reads it, she's going to think it's mean because it was assertive. And it was basically just like, I don't miss you. I don't want anything to do with you. Here's my thoughts on why that is. And don't contact me again. And so people who don't know the story between us, if they were to get just that email from me, first of all, they'd be like, dude, I thought Nicole was nice. They wouldn't understand that was what was needed to set that boundary and to say, I am really putting my foot in the ground on this. Like, you are not allowed into my life. And so it can be really hard to do that sometimes. And the reason I decided to be so assertive, because usually I wouldn't. Usually I would like sugarcoat or whatever. It's like, I needed this person to know I was serious. And sometimes that's what's required to keep someone at a distance. And it's not like I wish this person harm. I don't. That would be a grudge. That would be hatred. This is just saying, I don't want you around, and this is why. And again, that's also a form of letting that person go and letting them go do whatever they need to do, and understanding that they need to let me go and they need to go find new friends or whatever. And it's also a form of, again, I think self-acceptance and self-protection. And that's another thing too. I think that self-acceptance and self-love, you do have to think of ways to protect yourself. I think especially when you're intuitive and you're empathic, you feel the hurts of other people. You don't want to hurt their feelings. It's where the people pleasing comes from. But then if you're protecting other people, who's protecting you?
Well, that's exactly it. And, I think what you said about sometimes our boundaries can be a little sugar-coated, but most of the time they honestly have to be fairly firm. The way that I would look at that when you're setting boundaries is okay, this is like, let's say a tsunami. Like, let's say there's a tsunami coming towards me. Am I going to build a cute white picket fence, or am I going to build a giant wall with a dike behind it and like all of these other things? So I think we have to meet our experiences with fullness, right? We have to meet our experiences with what they're bringing to us, whether that's in a way of setting boundaries or anything else. I think what you're saying benefits a lot of people.
Thank you. Great. I'm supposed to be interviewing you here, and I feel like I'm doing all the talking.
Oh my gosh, don't worry about it. This is a joint effort because not one person is going to help this world. It needs to be a lot of us doing this. It's all good.
That is true. That is true. So let me see. So Allison, I'll just put this up, says, love this, very timely for me, and really appreciate both of your insights. Well, glad to hear that, Allison. And just so you all know, this was Matthew's topic idea. So when I was like, hey, come onto my show, what should we do? He's like, how about this? I'm like, that's perfect. So
it's something that keeps coming up. It keeps coming up in the world, like over and over again, like people needing to accept themselves and love themselves. I mean, that's probably honestly been around for literally ever. But I think with the way that the world is going right now, I think it's like now or never a little bit for some of these things. Not now or never. That's a little too black and white. But you know what I mean? Like this
dramatic.
Is optimal time would be now to figure this out.
Right. Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of people in the chat right now. For example, Michael Jenks, he's saying, that's me, people pleaser. I have acknowledged it and I'm definitely saying no more than I would have, but it isn't easy.
So hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard.
So what are some ways that people can say no? Like how can that become an easier thing to do? Because it is hard, especially when it comes to family and friends and people you care about. Like, how do you start saying no?
Do you want this in a fluffy answer or like the truth and not so sugary? Because I could tell you how I learned it, and it is not a cute story.
Well, let's hear it. I mean, I gave my not cute story, so let's hear your not cute story.
So I used to be the same way. Like, I would be a people pleaser till the cows came home. It was very, like, I felt like it was hardwired, and I didn't realize how serious it was because I was like, rainbows and unicorns and let me help everybody as much as I can. And then I got really sick, and I don't mean with a cold. I mean with like having to see specialists and, really scary things and challenging things. And I had to go through that experience. And then my friend Kyle, who's a wonderful human being, he said to me, you can make time for your wellness or you can make time for your illness. And I never forgot what that meant. And so it wasn't until I had to say no to people, because I literally, they say you can't give from an empty cup. Mine went through the trash compactor is what it felt like. Okay. And I burned out really hard a few times. And then finally I could start to whisper the word no. And so the way that I look at it is like, do I want to be healthy or not healthy? Okay, I want to be healthy. Well, I can help people if I'm healthy. If I get unhealthy, I can't. And so it really became for me a prioritization, of the way that I would go about my life. And so that's how I learned how to say no. But it was not fun, guys. Don't do it the way that I did it. If someone says the stove is hot, don't stick your hand on it.
Well, and you mentioned something interesting. You mentioned burnout, and I feel as if people who are highly intuitive burn out faster than those who aren't. Do you think that's true?
Oh, 100%, because not only are we taking in sensory information from the physical world, we're taking sensory information from literally another world that is so vast that we can't even see the end of it. And so, I mean, we're people who are mediumistic, psychic, intuitive, if they're healers or transmuters or, any of those gifts, they're gonna feel burnout much more quickly because they're operating on more than one plane of existence. So it's very challenging.
Yeah. So Stephanie says, can you explain empathic to me, please? That's actually a good question, because I think that's another term that people hear a lot and don't necessarily know what it means. So how would you describe empathic? So
empathic to me is, I'll give you a quick definition, because I could honestly talk about it probably until everyone was like, I'm going to bed. So like in 2 weeks. So empathic to me is where one person who maintains a certain vibration can very easily, either by on purpose or by accident, begin to resonate at the same frequency as somebody else, and specifically in the emotional energetic ranges. And so what that means in English is that an empath could be walking along the street feeling great, and somebody 2 blocks away has a panic attack, and the empath begins to have a panic attack now, or feel it at least. Now, the other thing with empathy that's interesting, and I've never met an empath who was not also a healer or somebody who could take negative energy and transmute it through themselves into something more beneficial and positive. So they're kind of like the amazing filters of the universe in a sense. But in order for that to work, because we're human beings, we have to experience something. We have to work with it within ourselves in order to change its structure. So the anxiety attack or the depression energy comes in, the empath works through that process on their own, and then that energy becomes a lot lighter and a lot more positive. So that would be my definition of an empath.
Oh, yeah, and I think, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, and they're also usually really, really nice and on some medication at some point in their life for anxiety. That'd be the last thing I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. In fact, and one of the things too is just to clarify, like I do believe there's a difference between empathy and being an empath, and that's another thing that I see like science getting across a lot. I don't think one of the things that is interesting about this spiritual, I don't know how to put it, like new agey spiritual becoming more mainstream, is more and more people are like, I'm an empath, and it's like, well, 1 out of the 3 probably really is.
Yeah.
So it's become like this buzzword. And so a lot of people think that if they have emotions, they're an empath, or if they have social anxiety, they're an empath. And some of them are, but some of them are processing things that may have happened to them as a child and whatnot. And so crowds make them, nervous and whatnot. And so anyways, one of the things that I've been noticing more and more is, you have the HSPs, so highly sensitive people, which is what I learned I am. The more I was looking at the difference between empaths and the HSPs, I'm like, I'm HSP because I don't necessarily absorb everything, thank God.
Same, agreed. I'm not an empath either, and I'm thankful. Yeah. I don't think you and me could do what we do, like all the public stuff that we do, if we were empathic. No. I think we would be dead. Yeah, I don't think we could do it. No.
Yeah, well, because like I don't know how I learned to put up like energy walls, but I'm just almost automatically putting them up. And if they don't automatically go up somewhere, something's off. Something's wrong, because they're just like there. But yeah, you're right. And I also agree with what you said. Like real empaths are really nice, and they just have this big heart, and they want to help so many people. And and I think you nailed it when you said they're able to transmute energy. I think you nailed it on that one, because one of the things I've noticed is a lot of people who claim they're empaths, they have a lot of feelings, and that's fine, that's good, but they don't know how to transmute. And empaths seem to know how to do that naturally.
Yeah, they do. It's often very unconscious. Like, I don't even know that they're aware of it. But yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think it's more rare than what people think. And I think, like, yeah, highly sensitive people, empathic people, and empathetic people are 3 completely different things. Empathetic is like if somebody, I don't know, gets hit by a car in front of you and you're like, oh my God, I feel so much for that person and their family and all that. An empath would be lying on the ground because their body just experienced the being hit by a car at a very significant level. So yeah, they're totally different things. And I think you're right. A lot of people are highly sensitive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're true empathic, because empathy is actually a secondary to the gift of transmutation. The ability to transmute energy is actually the true purpose. Empathy is like the side effect of it.
Yeah. Well, it's the filter that the energy goes through.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So Allison just asked, can't you be an empath and also be good at shielding?
I think
but it takes time.
Yeah, it takes time, and also to realize that because you're an empath, your purpose is to take in crappy things and make them positive energetically. Like, you can learn to run the energy on the outside of your auric field, but it's still going to hit you on some level. But you can change your relationship to that experience so that it becomes no longer a burden. And I guess that would be like sort of a way of shielding in a sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then Lynn is saying, I'm glad you cleared that up. In order to be intuitive, you have to have empathy for others. I think so.
I think at least compassion, because I'm actually not a very empathetic person, but I'm very sympathetic and I'm very compassionate. And the difference is empathetic is here in the heart, sympathetic is more here in the mind, and compassionate could be either one. So yeah, I think, yeah, at least on some level, you have to be loving and considerate and compassionate for sure.
Right. Well, and then what I find is I'm the same as you. Like, I'm compassionate and sympathetic, but the empathy is when it's people that are really close to me or that I have an attachment to. That's when it's just like, for example, Mike will be going through something and I'll feel it. Like when it's him, it's like I'll feel it. But it could be my neighbor two doors down, and I'll sense something like something feels off. Like there's some energy over there, but I'm not absorbing it. It's just like.
You're not living it.
Yeah, let's cross the street and walk around that house.
maybe mail them some matches or something later.
There you go. Totally. Put some like angel cards on their doorstep or something. Hope you feel better. Bye.
Your way of dealing with things is so much nicer than my way of dealing with things.
So Michael is asking, can you desensitize yourself in some way? So I assume he's talking about the empathy and being able to, to not take in everything.
I absolutely think so. And I think that's that changing your relationship to it. So for example, if an empath begins to feel something that is happening in their environment, if they can sit for a moment and just say, okay, is this mine? And the answer is no. Then usually what happens is the experience will lessen by a huge percentage, like 60, 70%. So then they switch from a first person experience of whatever they're feeling to an observer position. So they still may feel it, they may be aware of it, but it will not feel like it's their experience. And so all of the anxiety, all of the fear, all of the WTF and the AF and all of those things begin to come down, and the person begins to just observe it without it becoming a personal emotional experience or a personal mental experience. So absolutely changing your perspective on it, asking yourself when you begin to feel overwhelmed, is this mine? No. Okay, cool. And you could go further. You could say, is it somebody I know? Is it someone I love? Is it the world as a whole? All of those questions. But the goal is that if it's not yours, you'll shift into observing it rather than living it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that you desensitize is to, I guess, just kind of accept it when it happens.
Yeah.
Just being in the acceptance of it. So it's kind of like if you're afraid of elevators, which guilty as charged I used to be. So I'd force myself to go on the elevator. I'd force myself to go on the elevator at work. And eventually when you're in a situation so many times, and when you're in a feeling so many times, and when you're getting feelings from others so many times, and you realize that it's actually safe to be in that feeling, that kind of desensitizes it as well. So you notice it, but you don't have to be attached to it.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Just observe it. Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, good stuff.
Your people have great questions.
They do. Yeah. Like that's, I'm telling you, when they show up, it's such a good time because they always just have these interesting questions. They have really fantastic points of view where they'll say something. It's not even a question. It's just something they'll say. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. Like I would have never.
I totally get it. I feel the same way on my page. Like the people that comment on things, they just amaze me every day. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I feel so lucky. See, you and I are great. We're very blessed that way that we're
super lucky.
Yeah,
I know. I agree.
All right. So Auntie Coco is saying, how do we know that we're really feeling a bad vibe from a person versus just ourselves being judgmental? Another great question.
I think what I would look at, and this is again something that I had to learn in a not cute way because it was like painful. But really, I think we have to look at people for what they are. So are there really truly negative people? No. There's people that are negative for us or for certain situations or whatever. And so I think when we look at the idea of judgment, really it's got to be in relation to us. So if somebody has bad vibes, well, they might have great vibes for somebody else. For us, they may not. And so understanding that, first of all, is that judgment is truly personal only to you when it comes to good vibes, bad vibes. The second thing is ask yourself, is it triggering something within you? Because that person could be a mirror for you. So you might see them walking down the street and you're like, oh my God, they have bad vibes. What about them has bad vibes? You got to pull it apart. I wouldn't stay so general. I would say, what is it that's provoking this feeling? And then look at yourself and say, do I have those qualities and dislike them about myself? Because that's a lot of the time what it is. And if they truly, truly just have energy that isn't good for you, then you can accept that and decide not to go and ask them to coffee or wherever. Right. Yeah. Swipe left. Like, totally up to you.
Yeah.
Swipe left.
Well, and the other thing you can do too is observe the feeling and notice that you're having it. And if you're like, oh my gosh, is this, is this me? Why am I feeling that? And the answer doesn't come up, because that can come up too. And I had this happen recently where there was someone who was grading me like absolutely the wrong way. And even my boyfriend Mike was like, what is with you? I'm like, I don't know. But for some reason, like, I can't stand this person. And it was someone I never met before. I had seen her picture and there was just like this whole situation behind the scenes happening that I knew nothing about. And I was just like, why am I so angry with this person? I don't even know her. And it was just crazy. And so, and even I didn't understand it. I'm like, what is wrong with me? I was seriously thinking about seeking therapy because I was like, am I jealous of this person and I don't know it? Like, what is going on? And I couldn't figure out why I was being so triggered. And it took about 2 or 3 weeks, but there was something that she ended up doing later on and information that got back to me about other things that she had done. And I was like, oh my gosh.
So it made sense. Yeah.
It did. Yeah. So sometimes you just have to notice that that's a red flag. So if you're getting that feeling that someone's dangerous or you don't like them or whatever it is, pay attention to that. That's feedback. And if you can't figure out what's triggering you, and most of the times you probably will, like Matthew was saying, like ask yourself, like, what emotion is this triggered? Can I put a name to it? Is this making sense? Other times, if you're highly intuitive, that may not happen. You may not afford the luxury of getting that answer. But if you just notice it and let things play out later on, you might have that same like WTF moment that I did where I was like, what the hell? And that's one way that you can start validating your experiences more. But
I think that's really, really good advice, actually, because it is true. It isn't always about us. Sometimes they really are like knife behind their back. So I think maybe the lesson, like if we take what I said and what you said and stuck them together, it would be like, trust your intuition first and foremost, put the brakes on, and then take a step back to figure out if it's you or if it isn't. If it's not you, then definitely trust it, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super good advice.
Thank you. Okay. And then Sue Novak, hi Sue, says, what's the best protection prayer to use from negative spirits? Do you use protection prayers?
So for me, I think you could literally do whatever you want. The intention is the important part. So what prayer hits you in the right way? What prayer brings the sense of safety to you? Like, because it could be a prayer, it could be like knocking pots and pans around, it could be burning sage, it can be any of those things. The important thing is that your intention is strong, because if you know you're protected beyond a doubt, you are. If you don't and you need something to levy that trust up a little bit, then do so. But at the end of the day, it really does matter. Like how you feel about the prayer matters way more, because if you ask anybody that question, you're probably going to, if you ask 100 people that, you're probably going to get 100 different answers, or at least 90 different answers. And so, you've got to go with something that gives you the strength to know that you're protected, because when you feel strong, your auric field will be strong. And so, I mean, it's totally personal, whatever you choose.
Right. Yeah. And, sometimes people feel comfortable when they're praying to specific saints or divine beings. And so, just also who you direct it to, because that's another thing people ask, well, who should I make my protection prayers to? It's like, well, who do you believe in?
Yeah, totally. They're all there. Just pick
They're
one.
all there.
They're all there.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. I know we've got a lot of questions, so let me see what else we've got. Stephanie asked, okay, I knew there was one that I missed. Could being empath control your moods?
I just want clarity on the question. So do you mean like you can control your own moods being an empath, or that if you're empathic, there's less control of your moods?
I think that, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, I think what she meant she said control, but I think influenced is probably the better word. So
Yeah, that
being an
makes sense.
empath influence your moods.
Yes. Yeah, that girl. Yeah, like no, that's totally what that's about. So, absolutely, it will, and it will. Being an empath will sometimes greatly shift your perception of your environment and the sort of emotional atmosphere of a space or an experience. Absolutely, it will.
Yeah. And, if you are somebody who goes through major mood swings, that's another way where the self acceptance is so important.
Yes.
People who have those different, chemical, I don't like to call them chemical imbalances, although I know that's the term that a lot of people do, but that a lot of people use. But we're all built differently. We are energetically different. We are physically different. And so our bodies were all designed to absorb information and process it in different ways. And so if you're someone who does go through vital mood swings, or maybe you're someone who doesn't necessarily go through mood swings, but you know that your emotions do change, and sometimes maybe you go through bouts of depression or whatnot, finding ways to be accepting even of that is so important. And the reason I feel prompted to say that is because I think that sometimes we really want to put a label on whatever is causing that shift inside of us that we don't like. And so, I think that's why the medical community is so busy all the time, because everyone, they don't just want answers, whether or not they know it. People want labels, because if they can get the label, they can just say, oh, well, I'm bipolar. Oh, well, I've got fibromyalgia, whatever it is. And I'm not saying it's bad to have the diagnosis. When you have the diagnosis, you can know what to do with it. But what I found for most people is when they have the diagnosis, they feel just as lost.
Yeah, it can be that way for sure. And I think what people are seeking sometimes is either validation of their experience. So like if it's illness, for example, like they want a label because then it validates that yes, they are sick, whether they are or not doesn't matter. But yes, they are sick. I think what you're saying is totally true. And I think the other side of it is when there's a label, then there's a solution, or there's a way to make it stop, or there's a way to navigate it or whatever. Totally agree with you.
And I found that like a lot of people, when they have the label, and like you said, they'll think there's an answer, and sometimes there is.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Sometimes there is. I think that's the big word. Sometimes, but a lot of times, doctors will prescribe different medications and whatnot, and it's really, they don't know what's going to happen before you take that first pill. They're hoping that you're one of the 72% that it works for, but they're taking a gamble that you might be part of the 27 that it doesn't work for.
And it is a hard, medication is a hard thing, man. And depending on the type of illness, like it can really be like taking a handful of darts and throwing it at a dartboard and seeing what sticks. It's very challenging sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And the older I get, the more people I've met who've been on different medications, and they wanted to heal something, and it ended up maybe making that better, but then another thing pops up, like you just don't know. And I think that's why it's so important for us to be really accepting and loving of ourselves when we are going through those ups and downs in our own body or with our emotions. And I'm not saying, of course, that you shouldn't go to the doctor. Like, obviously, if you're feeling really sick, for example, like for those of you who don't know, I had a back injury over the weekend while I was making cupcakes.
I won't ninja muffins.
Evil ninja cupcakes is what you're calling them. Yeah. So I made these like really cute and adorable, innocent looking cupcakes. But I won't get into details, but they hurt my back. They ended up hurting my back. But because I know the cause, and because I know, I've been through this type of thing before, I didn't go to the doctor because I've been through this type of thing before. But if my back wasn't healing and it wasn't getting better, obviously the smart thing would be to go to the doctor and figure out what's going on, and whatever. But the point being, I think a lot of people just want answers, and instead of tuning into themselves and accepting what they're going through, and acknowledging that your body and your moods are going to shift, because energies around us are always changing. The things we're doing, the way we behave, that's often changing. sometimes we just need time to be able to process what our body is going through and what that our chemicals in our body at that time are telling us. And sometimes we just need to rest,
Yeah.
And so,
I
yeah,
sometimes.
go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm so bad for cutting people off,
No,
and I
go ahead.
totally don't mean to. Okay. So you know what? What's interesting about it though is like what you're saying is so right. Like sometimes we just need to take that step back and go within and process things. But I find one thing that is a reoccurring theme in my work is that our world doesn't allow time for it. And that is a real serious problem in the world. And I think, if you look at the way what our society as a whole is based on, it's based on efficiency and, how quickly can we make maximum amount of product and, best quality and constantly changing and innovating and all of that. But what efficiency doesn't have time for is emotions at all, because emotions are not efficient things. In fact, they're the opposite of efficiency. And so, I think what the real question might be for a lot of people is how, in the current atmosphere of our world, can I take a step back? What does that look like when I work 2 jobs and all of that? And it's a very challenging time to be alive and have regular human experiences. I think it's very hard.
It is. And you're right. People having to work 2 jobs, or even someone having to work 1 job that has high demands, high pressure, long hours. And so they're sacrificing time with their kids and their family to be able to provide for their kids and their family. So it's like this catch-22. And you're right. We don't really live in a society where we're allowed to rest. Like rest isn't glamorous.
No,
rest isn't glamorous.
Not going to get the work done.
Right. And so because we're, so a lot of times people want to, like for me right now with my back, I want to get healed quickly. I want to so I can, run out the gate flying again. But instead I'm having to take things slowly. Yeah. But that's just the pace that we've been told is normal and is acceptable.
Yeah. So. It's so true. I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan of like 5-minute things. So like 5-minute meditation, 5-minute breathing, 5-minute and all of that, and just sort of filling different parts of the day with things that don't take a lot of time but have a high benefit or a high impact. So if you pick your most stressful moment of the day, let's say it's 11 a.m. every day. If most days are stressful at 11 a.m., then at 11 a.m. or 11:05, in the midst of that stress, take minimum 3 minutes, maximum 5, close your eyes, put on some music, whatever, figure out where you're holding the tension in your body, slowly relax the muscles, breathe it out. And if people start doing things like that, people who are drawn to it start doing things like that, they'll notice over time they can handle the difficulty better and they can handle the stress better, and they have a deeper sense of peace and a less sense of attachment, but in a good way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Go find those 3-minute or 5-minute things that make you feel better or help you to release the tension. Because those 5 minutes are well spent.
I think so. Just go to the bathroom the long way, like in the office building, like whatever.
There you go.
Whatever you have to do.
Don't bother me. I'm peeing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Of course, I always ohm when I pee, don't you? Everyone does.
So tell people where they can find you.
So you can find me, honestly, I have a website and all of that, but Facebook is where I'm most active by far. So it's Matthew Stapley, Psychic Medium. That's my professional page. And then I do the TikTok thing very rarely, and Instagram or Instantgram or whatever occasionally. But Facebook would definitely be the place. If you want my website, it's MatthewStapley.com.
All right, fantastic. So I think that kind of wraps it up for today. So I do want to thank you for joining us and for sharing your insight with us. And
thank you for having me.
Absolutely, yeah. And also want to thank, of course, everyone who was able to show up live today. So giving an applause to everyone who came today. You guys had fantastic questions and wonderful insight. And again, be sure that you follow Matthew. I'm sure he will be back sometime because
I would love that. I really had a good time. I think that the way that you explain things and the way that you just glow, for lack of a better word, with the work that you do is truly inspirational. And I really appreciate the offer to be here today. It was wonderful.
Well, thank you. And I could say the same thing about you. Like, you just have this amazing energy. You're fun to talk to. You're upbeat. You're on it. And, you give very what I love is when I can find those mediums that give intuitive and practical advice. And you're definitely one of those. So you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. I do not sit on a mountaintop smoking kale and weed. So, like, I'm about as real as you can get for sure.
Good to know. So for those of you who are watching again, we thank you for being here. Be sure that you subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed, and hit that bell icon so you can be notified when I go live again in the future. Also, be sure that you check out Matthew Stapley on Facebook. And even though he only posts occasionally on Instagram, I suggest you follow him there too.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you next time.